Well, in business news, floods in South and Southeast Asia, governments and analysts putting damage and loss on those floods at $20 billion for the month of November, adding up to more hardship for many who are already vulnerable. Asia-Pacific Economics breaking down the cost across Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand and Malaysia. The forecast is for losses of up to 0.2 percentage points of GDP from flooding this year, while Sri Lanka in South Asia tops the list with about 0.8 percentage points in losses. Indonesia's economy expected to take a hit as well, roughly $4.13 billion this year. Affected provinces contributed 7.5% to total output in the third quarter, and they have been hit. Economists are calling for a revision in national projections to account for losses from a break in economic activity and damaged infrastructure. Vietnam this year facing a bill that's not far off from the record $3.5 billion in 2024. That's when the nation was hit by Super Typhoon Yagi. The World Bank assessment warns that in the absence of mitigation measures, climate change could cost Vietnam about 12 to 14.5% of its annual GDP by 2050. But Sri Lanka facing the pain right now, Cyclone Ditwa costing the island nation up to $1.6 billion. The Sri Lanka rupee fell 0.1% against the greenback, hovering near its all-time weakest level. Authorities say it will need around $7 billion to rebuild homes and vital infrastructure. More on the story, we're joined by Rajiv Biswas. Now, he is CEO of Asia Pacific Economics. Mr. Rajiv, all these countries, all of them will be suffering the same. Yes. So loss in household spending, loss in business spending, damage to infrastructure, and in some countries which have a very large agri-economy, damage to that as well. But this is relative to existing growth and relative as well to how quickly they can pick themselves up.
That's exactly right, because some of the ASEAN economies that are being heavily impacted by the floods in November and early December have much bigger economies and are much more diversified than others. So, for example, the Malaysian economy is relatively less impacted, although it did suffer from flooding. So the net impact on their GDP is relatively marginal at just about 0.1% loss to GDP, whereas Thailand, Vietnam are both expected to lose about 0.2% of GDP, whereas Indonesia, which has been very heavily hit in Sumatra and Aceh provinces, is expected to lose about 0.3% of GDP. But worst hit of all is Sri Lanka, which is also the smallest economy. It's suffered quite widespread flooding, and the current estimated impact on GDP is about a loss of 0.8% of GDP. They previously were expected to grow at about 3.5%. So now the growth rate is likely to be well below the 3% mark at probably around 2.7%. And of course, these are early estimates, and the impact could actually increase more as time goes by, because the assessment of the impact, the protraction of the flooding, all of these factors can impact on the duration and economic losses to various sectors of the economies of these countries.
But I suppose the concern would be if there's longer term damage, that might be because, for example, buyers think to look elsewhere to buy in perhaps differing quantities as well. Is there a way, for example, for Thailand to mitigate or alleviate some of the greatest pain from what it has to deal with right now in its southern provinces?
I think the southern provinces of Thailand have been very badly hit by flooding, and the impact on various sectors of the Thai economy are actually quite substantial in those provinces, notably the impact on agriculture, particularly rubber, palm oil plantations will be in the hundreds of millions of dollars of loss, according to current estimates. Also, they are an important hub for production of aquaculture, shrimp exports. That will also be hit by flooding. And they also export electronics and auto parts. And their supply chain issues come into the picture because of the flooding. It's very hard to transport the components from the factories in the southern provinces to other parts of Thailand or to Malaysia. So until the flood waters have receded and the roads are back to normal, there will be disruption. However, it's not going to be like the impact that happened in 2011 when Thailand was suffering from very protracted flooding and had a very big hit to its economy. So I think this will be a shorter duration, although the impact will be quite substantial, and the current estimates are in the order of 0.2% of Thai GDP being lost due to these latest floods. But the problem for Thailand is that its growth rate was already expected to be pretty low at just around 2%. So this is dragging down the growth rate for Thailand even more. I think one of the biggest concerns is the damage to infrastructure, because, of course, it takes a lot longer to rebuild bridges, roads, railways. And of course, housing, because housing's also been hit pretty hard in all of these flood-impacted countries. So I think all of those costs and the rebuilding, the reconstruction is likely to put significant fiscal costs on the ASEAN countries affected, and particularly for Sri Lanka, which has had such widespread floods. The concern is they're fiscally quite constrained in terms of their ability to spend because of their budget problems. So they will face a lot of challenges and will need international support to rebuild and recover from these.
So the immediate challenge of short-term paying for this, as well as longer-term paying for expected impact of climate change, human-induced climate change. Thanks for that, Rajiv Biswas, CEO of Asia Pacific Economics.